They're saying that there's like this fake scheme to cook up electors. I thought it was pretty interesting, Phil, but you posted this clip of Van Jones from CNN just the other day. Let's take a listen to that clip, and then I want to hear your reaction on the other side of this.
Let's say one of the candidates questions the legitimacy of the state's count. The governor could choose not to certify the electors' votes. Or, though this is really unlikely, the state legislature could decide to contest the election and send a different count to Congress, meaning Congress could end up with no results or with competing results from the same state. Now, that's a violation of federal law, so Congress would no longer have to honor that state's electors at all. Now, the House and the Senate can then decide which result is valid or throw out the votes from that state altogether.
Okay, Phil, I'm not an attorney, so this is where I'm going to have to ask you. It sounds like he is describing what these 18 defendants are being charged with. Is that correct? And is there anything illegal to what they were doing in Arizona?
In my opinion, there's nothing illegal about it. And it goes back to, I think, 1959, when you had the presidential race heating up between John Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Okay, maybe 1960, but it was in that election when this actually happened, and you had a situation in Hawaii where there were two competing, slates of electors, and at some point they resolved the election dispute, so they wound up only sending one slate to Washington. But because they were able to have two slates of electors ready to go, once the election dispute was resolved, they had some electoral votes to count, because if you don't have them in place, then you risk losing, the state risks losing all of the electors. So this is not exactly an unheard of legal theory. It might be a long shot, but this is also some of what Fonnie Willis has done here in Fulton County, Georgia, as part of that giant racketeering case. So they call these things, the fake electors, when what they are alternate electors, and it's part of a now tested, all the way back into the Nixon Kennedy race. It's a tested kind of a thing. It's something that, as you saw Van Jones explain, the election of president and vice president does not occur in the ballot box in the various states. It occurs in the Congress with the Electoral College. And so that is when the true election is. And so if you believe that you have maybe a valid claim that the election was somehow invalid, you don't have time to have a traditional litigation, because look, the election is early November, and depending on how long it takes them to count all the mail-in ballots and all this stuff, it could be days or even weeks before anything is possibly certified. And then you've got a very early date in December, by which time the states have to have the slate of electors sent to Washington. They're not counted until January, but they got to be there in early November. And so that's a hard deadline. And if you don't have time to run a lawsuit, you're not going to have time to do discovery and all this. So when you have like a really, really short window of opportunity, lawyers have to think outside the box and get creative. That's what they did in Hawaii with the Nixon Kennedy race. That's what Van Jones was talking about. That's what lawyers did in Georgia and in Arizona. So in my view, what they're doing is they are criminalizing the practice of law. When you get a bunch of lawyers around in a room and you're trying to figure out how to resolve something, and it's, let's just say you're in a unique position, something that nobody's ever experienced before, they brainstorm, they send emails around, they toss it around and figure out what's the best strategy. It may not be a good one, it might be a long shot, but you've got to come up with something. So that's what was going on here. I think this was lawyers being lawyers, lawyers practicing law. There was no intent to commit any kind of a crime. They thought that they were following the playbook that was established all the way back in the Nixon election, the Kennedy election, when he was running against Nixon.
Yeah, I think it's really important to bring up. And you brought up the lawyer aspect of this. I'm looking at the indictments and I see just four popping off that I know were his attorneys: Christina Bobb, John Eastman, Jenna Ellis, Rudy Giuliani. Now, as a lawyer, Phil, you go and you get hired by a client and you're defending your client. What would it do? Well, I guess what would it do to other attorneys if they saw that you were being prosecuted for simply just giving your client a defense would other lawyers even want to start defending cases like this or similar to your, because it just doesn't make any sense. It seems like it's being used to intimidate other lawyers from potentially coming forward and representing Trump if he has a dispute, let's say in November as well.
Well, I think it would have a chilling effect on other lawyers trying uh, to do what they need to do for their client. We have an ethical obligation to be, zealous advocates for our client.
Mhm.
Um, and there are limits to that, but we have to be zealous. And I think if you have something like this, and it's always in the back of the lawyer's mind, and you wonder, okay, now if I really advise my client what I think they really need to do, am I going to wind up indicted by some local district attorney who just doesn't like my legal theory? If you don't like a legal theory, fight about it in court. That's what courtrooms are for. But you don't weaponize the justice system in a way to indict lawyers for doing what lawyers do.
Yeah. And I think that's really important that everyone understands that, because I think that's the real reason why they're going after all these attorneys. And it's really upsetting because it's not what we do in this country. Phil, thank you for joining us. I want to remind our audience that your show is available on YouTube. Again, folks, it's Inside the Law. Check it out. I watch it. That's how I, learn all my stuff about Fulton County. I'm not a lawyer. I just pretend to be. So, Phil, I appreciate all the work that you do. And I'm glad we had you on. We look forward to having you back in the future.
In a world where technology surrounds us, our exposure to EMR, or electromagnetic radiation, is higher than ever before, with over 400,000 cell towers and antennas in the United States alone, not to mention Wi-Fi that runs 24/7 in our home, cell phones that are carried in our pockets hours on end, and hundreds of 5G satellites in our orbit. Common complaints are ringing in the ear, sleep deprivation, heart palpitations, insomnia, and so much more. Start protecting yourself now. Introducing Redemption Shield, your EMF protection products. With over 700 5-star reviews, Redemption Shield is leading the way in shielding and grounding products, taking inflammation out of your body with grounding bed mats, grounding bed sheets, hats, scarves, Wi-Fi router covers, cell phone bags. Come and see us today at redemptionshield.com and get grounded and shielded. Redemptionshield.com. Use code BREE and save 10%.
You guys, I've said it once before, so I'm going to say it again. Under the Biden regime, I've never been more worried about my financial future. I called my good friend Dr. Kirk Elliott because I wanted to come up with a plan put in place to make sure I was secure, and he came with a plan for me to invest in silver.
I'm rich.
I've got my silver. I'm feeling so much better about my future. I highly recommend you give him a call and just chat with his team, 720-605-3900. Now, you could also head over to his website if you'd like to schedule an appointment. It's kirkelliottphd.com/Brianna. And if you enjoyed that segment, make sure you hit that like button. And if you want to see the news before it becomes the news, you have to subscribe to our channel. And well, if you have a liberal friend that you're looking to save, make sure you share this content with them.